Okay, we have a large crowd this morning, so we'll just give everybody a minute to filter in. So while we're letting the participants in, I just want to thank everybody for joining us this morning.
Pleasure.
Yeah, sure.
I assume that I don't have to unmute myself, that I'm unmuted. Is that correct?
Emily, will you mute and unmute, or?
Everyone is all set.
Okay.
Great. All right, we'll just give it one more minute and then we'll get started.
Is there going to be a little video first?
No, I'm gonna jump right into the opening. Okay, well, I have 2 minutes after the hour, so let's get started. So, thank you everybody for joining us at the Bioinnovation Conference. Good morning. I'm Marty Rosendale, the CEO of Maryland Life Sciences, a division of the Maryland Technology Council. Welcome to the most anticipated life science event we host each year, the 2020 Bioinnovation Conference. I'd like to take a minute to thank and recognize our co-chairs for the conference. They've both put in a tremendous amount of time and effort to make this the success that it is. So thank you to Brad Stewart, Chairman of the Maryland Life Sciences Board and Senior Vice President of Business Development for Montgomery County Economic Development Corporation, and Stephen Walker, Senior Director of Global Marketing, Early Portfolio Strategy for GlaxoSmithKline. I'd also like to thank the MTC staff, Wendy, Emily, Angela, Min, Pam, and Michelle for the amazing effort that went into planning this conference. You all have done a tremendous job. Thank you as well to the Conference Steering Committee. Your participation made a tremendous impact on this amazing turnout. So everyone, please reference the program book to view the committee members. Thank you to all our board members for your continued support of the Maryland Technology Council and the BioCapital Innovation Economy. We've been working hard and have an impressive lineup of speakers who are excited to bring relevant and timely content over the next 2 days. We also brought back the popular Bio one-on-one partnering platform, so please be sure to take advantage of it. I know I've already had 2 great meetings this morning on the platform, and I think you'll find that it's an excellent way to set up meetings. We're also honored to have the Honorable Jim Greenwood, who is the former president and CEO of Bio, joining us as our keynote speaker this morning at 9:15. And please join me tomorrow at 9 a.m. for a fireside chat with Senator Chris Van Hollen. Make sure to visit the exhibit hall where we have 37 exhibitors ready to chat and help identify solution providers you need to enhance your company and operations. While this event looks very different than past years, it's more important than ever that we not only look ahead at what's to come, but should also pause to look back at what has been accomplished this year alone. I'm proud and honored that each one of you makes up the fabric of our thriving life science hotbed here in Maryland. I'd like to especially applaud the countless members of our organization, as well as non-members, that joined forces earlier this year, rolled up their sleeves, and quickly got to work bringing solutions to a pandemic impacting the world. It was at this time that I truly saw what each one of you is made of: determination, passion, and a desire to collaborate for the greater good, something this world certainly needs more of, so thank you. We all applaud you for your long days and nights dedicated to making our world better. During these unprecedented times, our region, Maryland and the BioCapital, has risen to the challenge, demonstrating and showing the world that we truly are number one. The fact that we have more than 70 individuals from international life science companies joining us today further reinforces that we are making our presence known both inside and outside the boundaries of the United States. Today, we welcome the following delegations to the conference: Global Victoria, Australia; New South Wales, Australia; Queensland, Australia; Eau-de-France; Embassy Canada; Quebec, Canada; UK Midlands; the Japanese External Trade Organization, and the city of Yokohama in Japan. Welcome to all of you. We're so glad you've chosen to join the Bioinnovation Conference over the next 2 days. So I have a few housekeeping notes I'd like to share. First, please use hashtag MDLS Bioinnovation to tweet during the conference. Tweet a photo of yourself drinking coffee from your conference giveaway mug, courtesy of Sheer Partners. And earn a chance to win a MacBook Air, a $500 Amazon gift card, or a $250 Amazon gift card when you visit and interact with exhibitors and earn points. The points will be tracked live on the event leaderboard, so there's nothing like a little bit of competition this morning. For any technical issues or general event support, visit the info desk to chat with a member of the Maryland Life Sciences team. I'd like to thank our generous sponsors for this conference. We couldn't have done it without your support, and it's very much appreciated. Our diamond sponsor today is American Gene Technologies. The platinum sponsors are AstraZeneca, the Maryland Department of Commerce, and Pharma. Our affiliate sponsor is the Biotechnology Innovation Organization. The international delegate sponsor is Montgomery County Economic Development Corporation. The conference giveaway sponsor is Sheer Partners. Our gold sponsors include Alexandria Real Estate, Cordia Resources, Emergent Biosolutions, Iron Bow Technologies, Learning Undefeated, and VWR Avantor. So now, without any further delay, let's get this conference started. At this time, I'd like to acknowledge our diamond sponsor, American Gene Technologies. Jeff Galvin is the Chief Executive Officer and founder of American Gene Technologies and an outspoken champion of bioinnovation in Maryland, a strong supporter of the Maryland Technology Council and an active board member. So thank you for your continued support, Jeff. And here's a message from Jeff.
Hi, I'm Jeff Galvin, the CEO of American Gene Technologies. AGT is proud to be the diamond sponsor again this year of the Biotech Innovation Conference. This is an amazing virtual show. I want to thank Marty and his team for pulling together a great program. We've got a bunch of educational information, and we've collected together some of the leading biotech companies in the nation. You would just be amazed to understand the tremendous amount of R&D and innovation that is going on in Maryland. And I've always been a big believer in this. I came from Silicon Valley and I moved to Montgomery County, just north of Washington, D.C. And I've been developing American Gene Technologies in this environment because we have an amazing base of STEM education, great universities, and over 70 national types of federal institutes that are doing advanced research and development around this area. And what that means is that there's a tremendous amount of cutting edge development, PhDs, biologists, geneticists, everything that you need to put together a team that can do something really great with gene and cell therapy. Now that's exactly what AGT has been doing for the last 13 years, believe it or not. And this year we have an amazing announcement for you, and that is that the FDA has approved AGT to begin a phase 1 human trial of our HIV functional cure. Now, what this means is that we're going to get a chance to test out something that we believe will be a one-and-done treatment that will take an HIV-infected individual and make them permanently immune to HIV. They could never get AIDS, They could never infect anybody else, and they could never be reinfected. They'd be better than cured. Even if they were in a vulnerable community where there was a lot of HIV infection, they wouldn't have to worry about picking it back up again. And the most important thing is they wouldn't need antiretroviral therapy anymore to suppress the virus. We are creating a natural immunity by treating their HIV-specific T cells and just enabling them to effectively fight HIV in their body. And once you do that, HIV-specific T cells, if they're protected from HIV infection, should be able to clear HIV just like your normal T cells clear a cold or the flu. Well, this is a really exciting moment for AGT. We've been working a long time. We proposed this study to the FDA in 2016. We submitted the IND in 2019, and in August, they approved us to start this phase 1 human trial. And the data, the preclinical data and the cell process data and the protocol development data is something that gives me great confidence that there's a good likelihood that we're going to be able to show a functional cure. So if you have any interest in that, I hope you'll meet with me. And also, I just want to encourage people that are developing their careers or that are thinking about collaborations or, looking for jobs, make sure you stop by our booth or set up a meeting one-on-one with me or other members of the team. And I look forward to speaking with you. This is going to be a great conference. Thanks again, Marty, and everybody at the Maryland Tech Council for pulling together this terrific program. And I'm very excited to be part of it again this year. Thank you. Hi, I'm Jeff.
That's great, Jeff. Thank you for that announcement. That's amazing. And as Jeff mentioned, you can reach out to him either through the one-on-one partnering system or go visit American Gene Technologies at their exhibit booth. So now I'd like to introduce Rachel King. Rachel is an outstanding leader and key opinion authority in the biocapital. She's co-founder and CEO of GlycoMimetics here in Maryland. She has degrees from Dartmouth College and Harvard Business School and an amazing track record of executive leadership roles with Novartis, New Enterprise Associates, Genetic Therapy Inc., Alza, and Bain. Rachel continues to take a very active role on the board and executive committee of Bio. And I know Rachel because of her passion and willingness to stand with Maryland Life Sciences as we advocate in support of the biocapital. Rachel, welcome and thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you, Marty. And I want to thank the Tech Council for giving me the opportunity to introduce Jim Greenwood, which is a real pleasure and an honor for me to do. I actually knew of Jim before I knew Jim. And that's when I was running the Washington office for Novartis, and I heard about Jim as being an influential member of the important Energy and Commerce Committee, and somebody who was influential, but also importantly was always able to work both sides of the aisle, someone who was really known to get things done and to be someone that anybody could turn to as a real problem solver in Congress. So that's how I first knew of Jim. Then I had the pleasure to actually meet Jim and get to know him personally when he came over to Bio, where I was a member of the board. And that was a pleasure over many, many years to work together. And I know that you'll hear from Marty about some of the extraordinary details of Jim's career, which has been really remarkable and very influential. But I wanted to share some reflections on Jim as a really caring individual who I think has used his power and his influence to really help the vulnerable environment, our vulnerable planet, as well as vulnerable people. As far as the vulnerable environment and Jim's work on that, some of you may know, many of you probably don't know that Jim's on the board of the Audubon Society and brings that rare combination of being a former Republican member of Congress and an avid, dedicated environmentalist. And I think that the combination of those two attributes really puts Jim in an incredible position to advocate for our environment, which he does, I know, with passion and with great care through his role on the board of the Audubon Society. And I can tell you, if you ever really want to see Jim's eyes light up, you should ask him to show you some of the photos that he's taken of birds in their natural environment. And by natural environment, I mean the rainforests of South America or jungles in Asia. He's traveled the world with his hobby of photography, but really in support of this advocacy and his deep caring for the environment. I also want to reflect on what I see as Jim's deep care for individuals, and particularly for vulnerable individuals, which I think has also been reflected in his career. And again, many of you may not know that Jim started his career as a social worker, working with families and individuals in need. And I think there are probably, I'm sure there must be many different reasons why people enter politics, but from what Jim has said and from how I've observed him, I really think that he entered politics because he wanted to help people. And I think that's how he has spent his career and how he's used his authority and the influence that he's gained. And I think we've seen that in particular in some of the advocacy that he's done at Bio, and really everything, as I've seen what Jim's worked on at Bio, always coming back to how can we ensure that people who need our medicines can afford them and have access to them in some affordable way, and really emphasizing through all the advocacy he ever has done through Bio, advocating as a leader that if people can't afford the innovation that we provide, then our work is really for naught. And so I think Jim's real care for getting our products to those vulnerable people who need them has really shown through. So we will be honoring Jim for a lot of things today, and I want to particularly in that context so recognize what a sincere, caring individual that he is, and how he has used his extraordinary influence to care for both the vulnerable environment and vulnerable people around us. It's really been an incredible record, and I know Jim still has many more things he intends to do with those skills and with that deep care that he brings. So I want to thank you, Jim, and offer my congratulations on this award.
Thank you, Rachel.
Rachel, thank you for that. And thank you for all your support. So this year, we're honored to present the Bio-Innovation Lifetime Achievement Award to Jim Greenwood. As Rachel said, Jim has served successfully in both the public and private sectors, and his accomplishments stand as a testament to his commitment to patient empowerment, sound public policy, and scientific innovation. Jim is the immediate past president and CEO of the Biotechnology Innovation Organization, the world's largest life sciences trade association with over 1,000 members working to advance biotechnology innovation. His 15-year tenure has brought major accomplishments, including working to clear a statutory pathway for generics companies to make complex biologics. As well, he helped shepherd the passage of the 21st Century Cures Act that works to accelerate the development of medical products and bring new innovations and advances to patients. His pro-innovation focus has paved a way for bringing new drugs to market, accelerating the arrival of new crops to feed more people, and new fuels to make the planet more sustainable. A graduate of Dickinson College, Jim began his career as a social worker in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. His long-held commitment to public service and specifically children's issues led him to the Pennsylvania State Legislature, where he served 6 years in the General Assembly and 6 years in the Senate. He was then elected to represent Pennsylvania's 8th District in the House of Representatives from 1993 to 2005. During his time in Congress, he was a senior member of the Energy and Commerce Committee and was widely viewed as a leader on healthcare and the environment. He crafted legislation to reform the Food and Drug Administration, and he led the fight in Congress to allow stem cell research to be conducted by US scientists to treat disease. Jim's passion for and confidence in the industry is best demonstrated in his quote from the Bio Convention earlier this year. Jim said, "Biotechnology is the most profound endeavor in human history. We are no longer controlled by our DNA, we're at the controls. We're not victims of the disease, but the victors over it." Jim, thank you for fighting the good fight and for working relentlessly to build a favorable ecosystem where bioscience companies can deliver a new generation of safe and affordable cures. Jim, I wish I could be there to shake your hand and present the award in person. I'm sure we'll get there soon, but it's well-deserved, and congratulations. Thank you so much for everything that you do.
Well, thank you, Marty. I'm very humbled by that. It has been the thrill of my life to run the Biotechnology Innovation Organization for 15 and a half years, and I'm still deeply involved in it. I'm going to stay involved in it. It's really, this award really goes to the thousands and thousands of people who make the industry work, and as Jeff just said, can do amazing things like find an actual cure for HIV. It's just astounding. I must tell you that I'm only 69 and my mother is 98 3/4. So I get a little nervous when this is my first Lifetime Achievement Award. I'm going to be around for a little while, so, but I thank you. I do look forward to shaking your hand, and if there's some sort of a plaque or something that goes with this award, I look forward to hanging it in my office at home. So thank you to all. And Rachel, thank you so much for that very, very nice introduction. I just read in this paper this morning that my Senator Toomey is not going to run for re-election. And I'm thinking that maybe what I ought to do is take that introduction and use it as an ad and run for the Senate. It's quite flattering, and I appreciate it. And Rachel, just to
We'll
you.
support you, Jim.
To you, as you mentioned, we've known each other for nearly 16 years now, and I don't know a smarter, nicer, kinder, more ethical person anywhere than you. And I love having you for a friend, and I look forward to continuing that relationship.
Oh, thank you.
So
Thank
thank
you, Jim. Thank you.
Well, good morning, everyone. It's nice to be with you, at least virtually. Never in history has the value of biotechnology and the overwhelming leadership of the United States been more evident than in this coronavirus pandemic. 739 unique compounds are in development, including 189 vaccines, over half of which are being developed in the US, more than in the rest of the world combined. 45 vaccines are being developed in Maryland alone. President of the United States is now, excuse me, this just jumped. President of the United States is now benefiting from biotech expertise. And maybe now he doesn't think that the drug companies are getting away with murder. 1 million people have died from the disease, and nearly 6,000 more perish every day. And 7.6 billion people are desperately waiting for biotechnology companies to develop and manufacture and deliver safe and effective vaccines to save their lives and to rescue the global economy. We can, and we will. We have found cures for 500 diseases, but that leaves 7,000 diseases for which we haven't. But we can, and we will find those cures using gene therapies, cell therapies, immunotherapies, CAR T, CRISPR, both biologics and small molecules, and new technologies we haven't even yet invented. There are no laws of nature that can stop us. Only the laws of man can do that. And never before in history has a president, the Congress, governors, and state legislators been more intent upon passing innovation-killing laws. It's not because they're trying to kill innovation. They're trying to reduce the cost of medicine. Innovation is just collateral damage. Unfortunately, they're under the illusion that they can protect patients simply by reducing drug prices, but they're wrong. Price controls undermine innovation, and they are neither effective, necessary, nor sufficient to reduce patient out-of-pocket costs. Out-of-pocket cost is an insurance problem. 28 million people, non-elderly people in the United States, have no insurance. And if President Trump gets his way in the Supreme Court a week after the election, another 23 million men, women, and children will lose their insurance. Now, 156 million Americans are fortunate enough to have employer-provided health insurance, but half of them are in high deductible plans. And where do most of them encounter their deductibles? At the pharmacy. And when they do, they don't usually get mad at the pharmacist. They don't get mad at their insurance company. They don't get mad at their employer. They get mad at the drug company who made the medicine. And of the 44 million Americans on Medicare, more than 1 million of them pay more than $3,000 a year out of pocket for the medicines they need. And many pay $6,000, $9,000, and $12,000 a year. All of this is immoral. No one should ever go without the medicine that they need because they cannot afford what their insurers demand from their pockets. In fact, I will argue that no one should pay anything for medicine. Taking medicine is not a choice. And when out-of-pocket demands destroy adherence, people get sicker and they wind up in hospitals, costing a lot more than their medicine would have. There is a place for deductibles in health insurance. For instance, if I twist my ankle and I need an x-ray, I can call an ambulance, it's $450. To take me to an emergency room, it's going to cost a couple $1,000s. Or I can call my neighbor to take me to an urgent care center and get an x-ray for a couple $100s. A deductible makes perfect sense in cases like this, but deductibles make no sense for prescription drugs. When it comes to what patients pay for drugs, what we have is an insurance problem, and it's really not hard to fix. Now, when I first started saying this a few years ago, even many of the bio and pharma board members said it was a bad idea. They argued that everyone will say, well, if we take the pain away from the patients, drug companies can charge whatever they want. Really? Patients should be used as hammers to pound down drug prices? Well, first off, let's talk about drug prices. In the past 6 years, annual net increases of brand drugs have gone from just 4.6% net to minus 3.1%. So what is the problem about which all of these politicians have their hair on fire? It's an insurance problem and a Medicare problem. And it isn't really all that hard to solve if the policymakers and the media get over their obsessive vilification of drug companies. It's also a pharmaceutical benefit management problem. PBMs have evolved from the practice of using their massive purchasing power to lower drug prices to the business of forcing prices upward to collect billions and billions in pocketed rebates. Now look, none of this is to say that the drug industry doesn't need to make some changes. We do. We need to preserve the Hatch-Waxman social compact. Innovators get their prescribed patent and data market exclusivity. And then drugs need to go generic. Now, this is going to be increasingly important as we develop miraculous gene therapies, as we just heard about, that rightly command very high prices. They will save the healthcare system multiples of their price. But eventually, these prices will also need to be reduced. The Medicare Part D program needs reform. I was there at its creation. I was very involved in creating that program. But there should be caps on out-of-pocket costs, and those caps should be quite low. Democrats and Republicans agree. And here's another thing, the 70% discount in the donut hole that the industry has to give, it's just bad politics. It's invisible to the beneficiaries, so the Congress gets no credit for it, and neither do the drug companies. There are more visible ways to reduce costs to the program and showing that we're contributing. So now let's return to the COVID vaccines. The administration's Warp Speed program is producing terrific results. But because President Trump has kept insisting that we'd have a vaccine before the election, many understandably worried that he would pressure the companies developing the vaccines to cut corners, try to rush their vaccines to market. That won't happen. Moncef Slaoui, the director of the Warp Speed program, has said he would resign if that were to happen. And so has Peter Marks, the head of the FDA's Center for Biologics Research and Evaluation, I should say. No vaccine maker wants to have its product injected into healthy people unless it meets the FDA's gold standard of safety and efficacy, period. We're going to have enough problems with vaccine hesitancy and building herd immunity without people suggesting otherwise. Now, the NIH approved a single data safety monitoring board for the Warp Speed COVID vaccine trials. They, and only they, get to see the patient data in real time and are able to know which patients have been injected with vaccine and which have been injected with placebo. They can hold a trial as they did temporarily with AstraZeneca's. And conversely, if they observe that a vaccine is showing very high safety and efficacy, it can recommend that its sponsors submit an emergency use application. Arguably, to do otherwise would be unethical. So, we clearly won't have a vaccine before the election, but we will have an election like none we've had before. And I think the most important election of our times, at least so far. So if you'd like to know, I'll tell you exactly what's going to happen with the election. It's going to be a mess. 80 million people will vote by mail, and twice as many as the last presidential election. For millions, it will be their first time. Hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of completed ballots will be thrown in the trash because, depending upon in which state they were cast, they were mailed too late, signatures didn't match, the wrong envelope was used, or a photocopy of the voter's ID was not included. So not only may one presidential candidate actually attract a majority of the voters and lose in the Electoral College, as happened last time, but this time he may also attract the majority of votes in some states and not have enough of those votes actually counted to win the Electoral College votes. Votes that are postmarked by Election Day may be counted for as long as 3, 6, and 9 days after the election in several swing states. Now, Republican state legislators in my state of Pennsylvania have asked the U.S. Supreme Court to overturn the state court's decision to allow the 3-day count extension. If the Supreme Court takes the case, it could impact a number of critical battleground states. So speaking of battleground states, let's see where we are with this presidential election with about a month to go. It takes 270 electoral college votes to be elected president. Now, beginning with the states that are either solid, likely, or lean blue or red, Biden starts with a big lead. He has 226 of those 270 votes needed pretty much in the bag, and he will need just 44 from the 187 toss-up votes. Now, Trump starts with just 125 compared to Biden's 226, and he needs to win 145 of the 187 that are up for grabs. This election will probably be decided in 6 states: Arizona, Florida, Michigan, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. Now, Biden leads in each of these states, with margins ranging from 6.4% in Pennsylvania to just a half point in North Carolina. But if you eliminate all the toss-ups and you call every state today based upon the latest polls, Biden wins in an electoral college landslide of 375 to 163. Fortunately for Trump, the election will not be held today, and the race will probably tighten up. What will be the impact of the president's COVID infection and that of a number of Republican senators and staff? What will happen with the Supreme Court nominee confirmation process? Will there be another African-American shot by police, resulting in protests and/or riots in the next month? Will white supremacists stir the pot? What other national or international October surprises lie ahead? No one knows. One thing we do know, though, is that the House is going to remain with the Democratic majority, but the Senate is very much up in the air. Right now, Republicans hold a 43 to 47 majority, and the Democrats need to gain a net of 4 seats to take over. But the Republicans have 23 incumbents on the ballot, and the Democrats just 12. Now, Democrat Senator Jones of Alabama, nice guy, but he's probably likely to lose. So the Democrats would have to defeat 5 incumbent Republicans to win the majority. Right now, their best bets would be to defeat McSally in Arizona, Gardner in Colorado, Collins in Maine, and Tillis in North Carolina. although that race just got more interesting since Tillis tested positive and his opponent just got caught exchanging racy texts with a woman, not his wife. Republicans in these contests are all behind in the polls. And so tight races in Iowa and Montana may well determine the outcome. So what does all of this mean for the future of biotechnology? As I said at the outset, we have been confronted with the worst set of proposed legislation, regulation, and executive orders in our history. H.R. 3, that passed in the House earlier this year, would impose foreign price indexing on not only just Medicare drugs, but on the commercial market as well. President Trump has issued an executive order to do much the same for Part B and Part D drugs. If we do this, the United States will not much longer lead the world in biotech innovation. Investors just can't take the chance that in the relatively few cases where the companies in which they risk their capital succeed, they won't be able to set prices at a level to justify their investments. And if we don't lead, China will. And we will lose our strategic advantage. And will China come to our rescue in the next pandemic? Can't count on that. So if Biden wins and the Senate goes Democrat, is all lost and lost quickly? I don't think so. First off, a new administration will need to focus intensely on approving, manufacturing, and distributing vaccines here and to protect ourselves and for the sake of humanity around the world. Well, beating up biopharmaceutical companies at the same time would be a very bad look. Second, the President and the Congress will need to do whatever it takes to get the economy up and running. That may require big investments in infrastructure and in clean energy. The pandemic has pushed the budget more out of balance than it has been since World War II, 80 years. The next administration and the Congress will have to create a budget that reflects these realities. And that will probably require tax increases. Reforming the Affordable Care Act and taking on drug costs and spending, turning their attention to healthcare will be next, but I think it will be later. And I think these competing priorities will give us time to work with Congress to construct reforms that will protect patients, limit state and federal drug spending growth, and maintain incentives for innovation. That won't be easy. We will need to make concessions. If Biden is elected, I think we can work with him. After all, his son died of brain cancer, and he responded by launching his cancer moonshot. He won't want to undermine innovation. And we can't let medical innovation be undermined because the work we do is too critical. It's too exciting, and it's too promising. And I believe with the help of all of you at the Maryland Tech Council and all of you with us today in other states and in other countries, I'm confident and I'm optimistic that we will succeed. Thank you very much. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Jim, thank you. Thank you for that. So in order to ask questions, I'm going to ask everybody, if you look at the bottom of your screen, there's a Q&A feature as well as a chat feature. I will monitor both for questions. Jim, first a comment. So thank you so much for that presentation. It was tremendous. You know, for so many reasons, this election is critical. So I'm going to encourage everybody. Remember, it's important to get out there and vote. It's important to encourage others to get out there and vote. But this year, it's also important to follow the directions. If you're voting by mail, make sure that your vote doesn't get lost or cast out because you didn't follow those directions. So, Jim, I'm going to exercise my prerogative as moderator and ask the first question, which is, you talked about vaccine development and some of the issues that are faced there and some of the perceptions, frankly, that are faced there. Our life science companies have been developing these vaccines at a breakneck pace. How is it that through public-private collaboration and partnership, we've been able to operate at that pace and still maintain the safety that the FDA needs to have us maintain?
Yeah, good question. So I think a number of things. First off, When this pandemic struck, the biotech community in this country and around the world came together as never before. We are, after all, ultimately a competitive industry, but we all knew that this was something quite different. This has not happened in 100 years. And the stakes were immense, unimaginable. Millions of people at risk and hundreds of thousands dying. I think 1 million people have died already. But even back in the very beginning, companies started sharing data. Bio put together a summit and a whole structure by which companies could share data. Companies were making deals and collaborations on handshakes. And then also, I would say many of them entered into this field or expanded what they were doing in this field, knowing full well that this wasn't necessarily the most economic, sensible thing they could do. It was the right thing to do for the country, for humanity, and for the world. So as I pointed out in the beginning, 700 and some compounds under investigation. So it's been really a remarkable experience to watch all of this, the industry as a whole, show off A, what we can do, and B, that we care enough to do it. I would also say that that Operation Warp Speed has been a huge success. I take a little tiny bit of credit. Alex Azar, who used to be on the bio board with Rachel, called me on my cell phone from his cell phone some months ago and asked, he said, if we were to do some kind of a Manhattan project to try to accelerate the development of a vaccine or vaccines for COVID, who should run it? I talked to Jeremy Levin, the bio chair. I talked to some other people, John Maraganore. And then I called Monsef Slaoui. Monsef also had been on the bio board and been at GSK for a long time, one of the world's specialists and greatest minds when it comes to vaccines. I called him on his cell phone, and I said, if the administration wanted to build some kind of a Manhattan project, would you consider running it? And I could tell his mind was turning because he didn't want to get into the political world. It's never been his place, but he knew what was at stake and that his country needed him. And so he said, well, they can certainly call me. As he was quoted in a couple of magazines, and excuse me, but I'm just quoting him. He hung up the phone and turned to his wife and said, shit, because now he knew he was going to be entering a world of a political world, and he's already seen things happen, like people like Senator Warren a hearing calling that for him to resign. He's certainly not doing this for the money. He's doing it for service to country and service to humanity. And I think he's doing a terrific job. So, and a lot of money has gone into this, and companies are manufacturing at risk, manufacturing their products ahead of approval. So I think it's just been a spectacular public-private working together. And I think it's demonstrated what we can do. Now, a lot of people have been saying, well, this is going to change everything, because now that the politicians and the media and the public see what biotechnology can do, and that it was we who came to rescue the world, maybe they won't pick on us as much. Well, maybe. I hope that's the case. But we've already, as I've said to a couple of CEOs of vaccine companies, you may be expecting that if your vaccine works, that the world will carry you on its shoulders. I can assure you there are many politicians sharpening their knives already to be challenging, where did you get your IP? What did you contribute? What are you going to charge for it? So I think we may get a little bit of a reprieve, but if you saw the hearings that were just went on last week, I can tell you that there's plenty of animosity out there to the industry. So we can't just expect to that all of these contributions that we are making will dramatically change the political reality.
Great. So Jim, we have a question here. You were talking about the fact that drug pricing is an insurance problem. And the question is, if we had to reassess the pharmacy benefit manager model, what would be your guidelines for better price negotiations?
Yeah, I don't know that anyone's actually figured that out right, but I think we know a couple of things. Even if you look at insulin, and insulin's sort of the poster child for unreasonable price increases, at least if you listen to members of Congress. If you actually look at the data, what you see is the price goes up and up and up, but it's been largely driven by the PBMs basically saying to the companies, whoever's going to give me the biggest rebate is going to get access to my formulary. And there are basically 3 big PBMs that control the entire process. And if you look at revenue on like a Forbes 50 list, you'll see one pharmaceutical company there, Johnson & Johnson, and they make a lot of devices and Band-Aids and all of that. You'll see a couple of insurance companies and you'll see a couple of PBMs. They're really huge business now. And it used to be, the PBM looked at 3 companies and said, okay, A, B, and C, you all make competing drugs. Whoever gives me the lowest price, I'm going to pass that on to the insurers and or the employers that they represent. Now it's reversed itself. It's whoever raises their price the most. And that's just, and then of course, the patients don't necessarily benefit from their copays because they're still in many instances paying on the list price, not the net price. So I think the whole system has to be changed dramatically. I've been hoping that the private sector would do it, that Amazon, some group of companies could get together and figure out how to actually make the best of the system, which is you have large purchasing power. You can use that in the marketplace to get drive competition and get lower prices. But the system is completely out of whack now, and it needs to be reformed. And I think many members of Congress understand this. It's just they're just trying to figure out how to do it wisely.
So Jim, there was a comment in the chat room, I think a little bit tongue in cheek. It says you might have to explain what working both sides of the aisle means. People might forget that time and how important it was. I'm curious your thoughts around, at least with respect to issues that are so critical to us in the biotech community. Do you see both sides of the aisle coming together for these conversations and these discussions?
Well, I hope you have the next 3 hours allotted for this discussion because it's a long one. It was different. I was in Congress from 1993 through to the beginning of 2005, and I did a lot of work across the aisle. Anna Eshoo, for instance, we were both elected in 1992. She's from the San Francisco area. We were both on the Health Subcommittee of the Energy and Commerce. There are a lot of Greenwood Eshoo bills that became law on a variety of health topics. And we would sit down, she would work with her members of the Democratic Party, I with the Republicans. We'd sort out our differences, we'd develop compromises, and we would get things done. And why has that evaporated? Because it pretty much has. If you look at a graph, I do some teaching at George Washington University once in a while, and if you look at a diagram of the House of Representatives, and you use red dots to depict the Republican members and blue dots to depict the Democratic members, and you go back to like the 70s, and you look at the overlap in voting. When did Republicans sometimes vote with Democrats and Democrats sometimes vote with the other party? It looked like this, if you can see it. It was a complete crossover, and over time, you've seen it go like this. So there's almost never a case on anything of any controversy where Republicans and Democrats vote in the same way. There are a lot of reasons for that. One of them has been gerrymandering. It used to be that on an election like the one that's coming up in 4 weeks and a day, many seats in the United States House of Representatives would be a toss-up. Wouldn't know who was going to win. I can probably tell you, who's going, the 435 seats in the House that are up right now. I could probably tell you with certainty at least 400 of the outcomes. So there are relatively few seats, and that's largely because the gerrymandering process, which, you know, we have the census every 10 years, and following the census, then the state legislators redraw the congressional districts. And the congressmen go to the state capitals of those states and they look at maps and they say, please get these constituents out of my district. They're not voting for me. Make my district more Republican, make my district more Democrat. So now we have so many seats that are lopsidedly one way or the other. And so if you want to go to Congress in any of those 400 and some seats, you have to defeat an incumbent, because you're not going to, you know, you're not going to beat the other party. So what do? If you're a Republican, you tend to run to the right of the incumbent. I'm more conservative. Or if you're a Democrat, you run to the left of the incumbent. I'm more liberal. And because few of us participate in primary elections, very small numbers of people participate in the primary elections where you choose which candidate you're going to have to represent your party, it tends to be the most extreme that come out. The more right wing come out, the more left wing come out, because they know they have a disproportionate impact on the election in a primary. And so they'll go out and they'll pick these extreme candidates. And then when they win, they get to Washington, and the Congress is increasingly more extreme. There are more right wingers and left wingers in the Congress than ever before. Now, add to that the impact of cable news. So if you look at Fox TV, it's watched almost exclusively by conservatives, and they live in one world. They get one perspective for the most part. They get what's called confirmation bias. You know, having an open mind is disconcerting, because you face ambiguity, and ambiguity is not comfortable. But if you can go somewhere and turn on a station and Hannity or somebody says, the rest of the world are a bunch of pinheads, you're right, you've got it, you're smart, don't listen to the other side. Or you can go to MSNBC and Rachel Maddow or somebody else and sort of saying the same kind of stuff. So now we can go to these parallel universes and have our biases confirmed and feel comfortable and not have to listen to the other side of the argument. And now the social media, the internet, has just exploded this. So people just live in these worlds where they only listen to people who agree with them. And now we've gone from a place where we simply disagree with our neighbors over policy questions to now we take the view that those who don't agree with us are somehow evil or bad people or don't deserve to live in America. So long answer to your question, but it's a huge problem. And what's going to solve it? People always ask, how do we solve this? I would say that part of the answer is reapportionment and gerrymandering reform. But I think ultimately we're so far down the road right now that it's really going to take a very charismatic president and presidential candidate who actually has the skills to say, look, my fellow Americans, let's sit down and talk. Let's cut down the rhetoric. Because at the end of the day, I spent 24 years in public office. And at the end of the day, why would you want to be there if the only thing you care about is your party winning or the other party winning, whether anything of value ever gets done or not? It's just not worth all the hassle.
Yeah, thank you for that, Jim. I know a lot of people in the circles I travel in are concerned about that and certainly like to see it improve. So the next question is a question about pandemic preparedness. It's a pretty long question, so I'm going to paraphrase the lead in, but essentially COVID-19 has highlighted a problem with preparedness. And the question is, what funding programs, policies, and initiatives should be permanently implemented to ensure that we at least have the basis for rapid production of countermeasures?
Well, it's a great question. I have served for the last almost 6 years now on a thing called the Bipartisan Commission on Biodefense. It's co-chaired by Tom Ridge, who was, of course, the first Homeland Security Secretary and the governor of Pennsylvania and a member of the United States Congress. The co-chair is Joe Lieberman, longtime senator, wonderful guy also from New York. Tom Daschle, former Democratic leader in the Senate, is on it. Donna Shalala, who was Secretary of Health and Human Services, now was elected to Congress last time out, all serve on this. And we, over the course of the last 5 or 6 years, have held hearing after hearing with every kind of expert you can on not only pandemic concerns, but also bioterror concerns. In 2015, October of 2015, almost exactly 5 years ago, we published a blueprint for biodefense. We said in that blueprint, not a question of if there will be another pandemic, it's a question of when. And just because it's been 100 years since the Spanish flu, don't think that this isn't going to happen again. The likelihood of it happening increases for a variety of reasons, having to do a lot with the proximity of humans and wildlife. So we made a whole set of recommendations. One of them was that the Vice President of the United States should head up a team to prepare for a pandemic. And we chose the Vice President because we said the President is too busy to do this kind of a thing, but the Vice President could oversee this kind of an effort and would have the political clout, if you will, to tell the Secretary of Defense and the Secretary of Health and Human Services and the Secretary of Homeland Security, et cetera, that they needed to cooperate and they needed to work together. So that was a recommendation that we made that was not accepted, but is probably why Pence was put in charge ultimately. Unfortunately, it was after the fact. We wanted the Vice President to prepare us for a pandemic. One of the other recommendations that we made was that things like personal protection equipment, things like ventilators should be readied. And we said in each area, particularly in urban areas, there should be a system of segmenting or tiering the hospitals. So which hospital in New York City, which hospital in Philadelphia, which hospital in Chicago, et cetera, would be best equipped to handle the first influx of severely sick people resulting from a pandemic or from a bioterror event. And then which hospital second and which hospital third. And then let's pre-position the equipment that we're going to need, the ventilators that we might need, et cetera, in those hospitals so that we would be ready. So we made a whole series of recommendations like that. And we published many booklets and publications since then. We had a press conference a few years ago at the National Press Club. And I said, look, members of Congress right now may not think that they should be holding hearings on these issues and preparing and passing legislation and so forth. But I'll tell you what, there will be a pandemic. And after that happens, they're going to ask you, why weren't you ready for this? Now, I'm not saying that the Congress didn't do anything or that the previous administration didn't do anything. They did. They took some of our advice and funded programs like BARDA, et cetera. But hopefully, now that the world has seen that this stuff is real, and if they believe the experts, it's not going to be another 100 years until this happens. The Congress and the administrations forthcoming will prepare us in ways that we're certainly going to be needing.
Yeah, so it's amazing that you all had the foresight to come out with those recommendations. And
well, I'll tell you something else. Actually, I think it was in 2003 when I was the chair of the Oversight Investigation Subcommittee of Energy and Commerce. We had a hearing on SARS, and Julie Gerberding, who was the head of the CDC at the time, and now at Merck and on the bio board, testified 17 years ago that our public health system was underfunded and that we needed to be prepared for a pandemic. So this is, some very famous people have said, who knew this could happen? A lot of people knew this could happen.
Yeah, absolutely. So Jim, the next question is somewhat related. So given, when the pandemic hit, we saw issues with supply chain and other challenges that companies faced. So what are your thoughts about reshoring of drug manufacturing to the US and what is the right policy there?
Yeah. I do think that we do need to be increasingly reliant on having the supply chain here. We really cannot depend upon places like China and India for the API and even for PPE. So I do think it's a matter of national security that we do that. Now, it's more easily said than done. There are economies of scale that can come, but I hope that that the United States and China can figure out how to cohabitate on a planet where we have very different systems of government and very different values. But make no mistake, China is galloping forward when it comes to biotechnology. That the Chinese have a set of 5-year plans, and every 5 years they renew that. And they have 7 pillars in their plan. And one of them has been biotechnology. And they have invested billions of dollars in biotechnology. Their private sector is investing in US companies. They're historically not so good at innovation. They've always been good more at the copying side of things. But they're getting better and better at innovation. And we need to think of biotechnology as a strategic issue. We need to make sure that we don't, and of course the irony is, while the Chinese government, for all its flaws and faults, is doing everything it possibly can to build up its biopharmaceutical industry, so many in the United States are undermining it. And it is absolutely critical that we figure out how to persuade members of Congress that we are not only the industry that saves lives and promises hope to patients, but we are a critical strategic sector in the United States economy. And we have to be able to, we need to constantly, and it's one of the few places where we lead in the world. Driver of jobs, driver of economics. I mean, it's just, I meant it when I said it's the most profound endeavor in human history. And, but we probably do need to think about making sure that we can't get cut off at the knees because we get into some kind of a spat or worse, some kind of a war with China.
Okay. So Jim, the next question is around inclusivity, equity, and equality. Here in Maryland, we're extremely diverse in this state, but I think it's pretty safe to say that the biotechnology community, the tech community, doesn't fully reflect that diversity. What are your thoughts around what can be done to further diversify the industry and include more men and women of color?
Yeah. Well, first thing you have to decide it's important. And you also have to recognize that diversity, whether we're talking about racial diversity, ethnic diversity, gender diversity, it's orientation diversity, et cetera. When you make sure that your workforce reflects that diversity, it's not just, you're not just doing those people a favor, you're doing yourself a favor, because there's a lot of data that has demonstrated that diversity actually brings greater creativity, different perspectives, and greater success to enterprises of all kinds, public and private. So that's for certain. And secondly, you have to go out and look. And you have to, I think it's very important, and Bio has led in this, to teach your entire workforce how to deal with unconscious bias. I don't want to go too deeply into this, but, and this will be a provocative statement, but we're all racists. And that's not meant to be, what happens is when you say we're all racist, everybody gets their hackles up. I'm not a racist. Racists are those horrible people that, discriminate and call people names and so forth. What I mean by that is that you cannot help but observe racial differences. You cannot help but have lived a life in which there were stereotypes that were out there, and it affects your thinking. So you have to consciously overcome that. You have to consciously overcome those biases. Don't pretend you don't see color. Of course we do. But it takes practice. It takes work. And as my daughter who studied these things in college said, you know, you don't ask the minorities to explain themselves. You know, you got to reach out. So I also think that we have to encourage diverse populations of young people to study the life sciences. And I think there's a lot that can be done with leaders of color and leaders who are women, leaders who are gay, to go into the schools and say, look, I'm the scientist, I'm the CEO, look what I'm doing. I'm curing AIDS, I'm curing Alzheimer's, I'm working on diabetes. Isn't this exciting? Wouldn't you love to do that? And we do that a little bit with the BioGenius program at Bio, but I think there's a lot more that can be done, and we'll all be so much better for it. And of course, my successor is McMurray, Dr. McMurray, is very, very, very focused on this. She's an African American woman, PhD, MD, and so she's setting a great example. The other thing that Bio is doing is we have a diversity and inclusion board level committee, and we are doing things like board ready programs where we're identifying women who are ready to serve on boards. So as biotechnology companies are looking for to diversify their boards, that there's a repository, if you will. And we're going to continue to expand that not only to the boards, but to C-suites, and not only to women, but to people of different races and genders, et cetera.
Great, thank you. So Jim, despite all the amazing accomplishments in your lifetime so far, as you pointed out, you're still a young man. So what's next? Where are you headed from here?
Well, thanks for asking. When I retired, I was going to stay at the helm for the balance of this year, and when Dr. McMurray came on, she was ready to go, and so the executive committee offered me to buy out my contract, and I said, if you're going to force me to get paid for doing nothing, I accept. But I am going to be a consultant for Bio all of next year. And I was thinking about doing some boards. I'm still looking at boards, so if anybody's looking for a board member, I'm available. But I called my old friend Charlie Dent. Some of you may know Charlie Dent. He's on CNN a lot, but he and I served in the Pennsylvania Senate together, and then in the Congress together. And he left when he left Congress voluntarily. We both left Congress undefeated and unindicted, so we're both proud of that. But when he decided to leave Congress, he called me and said, you know, you're at a trade association, what's that like? And we chatted, and he ended up at the law firm DLA Piper. And so I called him and I said, I'm thinking about, you know, what I might want to do next. What's it like being at a law firm when you're not a lawyer? And he said, perfect timing. I said, what do you mean? He said, the firm's number one objective now is to create a life sciences, health science policy and regulatory group. And you'd be perfect to chair that. So within a few weeks, that's what happened. So beginning in September, that's where I am. I'm at DLA Piper. I'm building that team, and I intend to build the dream team of policy and advocacy folks that can help the industry do the kind of things that I said that we're going to have to do before Congress. I'm also consulting on the side, because I had started this before I went to the firm, with Novavax, a company with which you're quite familiar, and also with a VC, life science VC, RA Capital. And I'm helping them with things like congressional relations and that sort of thing.
It's great. So it sounds like more to come.
More to come.
All right, cool. So first I want to point out, Jim, I don't know if you've noticed, but virtually every question and comment has started out with gratitude to you for everything that you've done, everything that you've accomplished.
Thank you.
Before we close, is there anything that you haven't had a chance to bring up that you'd like to bring up before we close?
Well, I'll leave you with my overused little thing that I say. Rachel's heard it probably 20 times, but maybe some people haven't. But it goes back to when I was in the running for this position. And I think there were 30 some candidates for the job, and they narrowed it down to a half a dozen. And I got called back to the search committee for the second time. And I had a letter from the headhunter saying, these are the questions they're going to ask you. And going to ask you, what do you know about healthcare? What do you know about politics? What do you know about public speaking? What do you know about, management and so forth? And the last question was, do you have a passion for biotechnology? And that kept me up at night, the night before. And I'm thinking, I really just, this whole thing about working at bio just kind of came up. So, how do I answer that question? So I pondered it at like 3:00 in the morning, and I went to the committee, search committee meeting the next day, and I was asked that question by Richard Pops. And I said, well, I knew you were going to ask me this question. And I was up at the middle of the night trying to think of how to answer it. And so here's what I came up with. And it's probably going to sound like what somebody might come up with at 3:00 in the morning, but it's this. In the 3.5 billion years since life first formed, when the first cell in the primordial soup on Earth divided and life began, according to the laws of Darwinian, the Darwinian laws of natural selection, all of this incredible diversity developed on this planet, including humans. And at least we think that we're the crown of creation. We have these huge brains and the opposable thumb and the great senses, and we can literally reach into our bodies, pull out our DNA, put it under a microscope. And from what we learn, we prevent a couple from burying its child, or we prevent a man from turning to his wife at 60 years and asking, who are you? And I said, natural selection is about survival of the fittest, and that's the driving principle. But we're too sensitive to allow only the most genetically fit to survive. We think everyone should have a shot. And what I'd like to do is help you outrun Darwin. And that's what you guys are doing, both in Maryland and across the country and around the world. It is a spectacular thing. It's exciting. I think we're at a cusp. You can always say that things are getting better because in science, because that's the nature of science. It builds upon itself. But I do think we're at an inflection point right now with gene therapy and cell therapy and CAR-T and gene editing and all of this. And so, as I said in the beginning, there is no law of nature that says we can't cure every single one of those diseases, those brutal, brutal diseases. And it's only the laws of men that we have to worry about. But just like we've become the masters of our own DNA, we're going to have to become masters of public policy. And every one of us has to be deeply, deeply engaged in the public sphere in order to make sure that the policy environment is conducive to that success. And as I also said, I think we'll succeed. Thanks for having me. I enjoyed it.
That's great, Jim. Thank you so much. Yeah, I remember I was a young man in graduate school when Genentech and Amgen were startup companies. And it's amazing what's been accomplished since then. So Jim, thank you so much for your time this morning. Thank you for your support. Rachel, thanks for joining us early this morning. And again, thank you for all your support and everything that you do for the biotech community. Appreciate both of you. Thanks again.
Thank you. And I appreciate the award, and I will cherish it. Thank you kindly. See you next time.